everyone. This is Tom Salemi. Welcome back to Device Talks Tuesdays. It's great to have you here. This is an excellent discussion. It's jam-packed. Got a great lineup, and it's an important topic too. We're going to talk about sort of the present and future of clinical trials. The topic being, of course, what's now and what's next, hybrid approaches to clinical trial oversight, brought to you by our friends at iMark Research. Great to have them here, and we'll get into the presentation in just a moment. I do have my little song and dance, of course, to remind you that this is a virtual event, as if you needed to be reminded of that. But the good news is that it's available on demand as a result. So you can replay this conversation if you missed something the first time around, or if you have a friend or colleague or anyone in your life who is hungry for more clinical trial talk. Please let them know they can register at devicetalks.com. It'll be available probably midday tomorrow. And once again, you'll be able to watch the slides. You'll actually be able to ask questions. So it's a great resource for anyone who is not able to be here at 4 o'clock Eastern. I know we're living in sort of a Netflix on-demand world, so consider this another streaming service for you. So if you are tweeting, thank you very much. Use hashtag DeviceTalksTuesday, so it groups all of the tweets together. Just want to remind you that this is us. We, in addition to putting on Device Talks Tuesday, have our Device Talks events. We'll be rolling those out, the 2022 schedule very soon, so stay tuned for that. And we have another couple of very cool products. The Device Talks Weekly, including one of our guests of the day, is on there. This comes out every Friday. We talk to leaders in the medtech industry to get their perspectives on important issues of the day. And we have some fun with Chris Newmarker, the editor of Mass Device, and other staff writers from the Mass Device pages and Medical Design and Outsourcing. So do check it out. You can subscribe on every podcast application that's out there. Amazon, Google, Apple are out there. So we have some fun, and I'm told it's informative. So please give it a try. And I'm pleased to also announce that we recently rolled out our Medtronic Talks podcast, which focuses exclusively on Medtronics, the great folks at Medtronics. We're going to have about 2 or 3 of these a month coming out, scheduled for 2, but we've got some extras coming together. So lots of great stories coming out of Medtronic. So once again, you can subscribe to that as well. You can also find both podcasts on devicetalks.com. But we'll now get into the conversation of the day. Thank you again to iMark for putting this conversation together. And we're going to start this off. I've got 5 questions that we'll go through. We'll take questions from the audience, of course. We may address them while we're in the midst of discussing a topic, or we may hit upon them at the end. So please, I would advise you not to wait till the end. If you have a question, type it in when you have it, and we'll get to it, I promise. And it'd be great to have an interaction with the audience. In fact, we have some poll questions that we'll be hitting upon throughout to make sure you're all heard from. So please do be an active participant in this talk. But first, I wanted to introduce our panel and ask them to just take a minute or less to let you know where they're coming from. We've got a lot of different perspectives here addressing this important topic. So I thought it would be wonderful just to sort of set the stage and set the scene. So Hamish Baird from Remington Davis, would you kick us off with the introductions?
Sure,
Hamish,
thank you,
sorry,
Tom.
Hamish Baird.
Yes,
I asked you how to say it before, and I screwed it up anyway.
It's okay. Thank you for having me, and a big thank you to iMark for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Hamish Baird. I'm the president of Remington Davis Clinical Trials. We are a clinical research site in Columbus, Ohio. We have a couple of locations, and we are the doctors and nurses who recruit and enroll study subjects. So we obviously have our own perspective on this topic, and I'm anxious to share mine and speak with all of you. But we've done about 550 studies over the last 29 years. And we have 2 locations and just under 30 employees. So we've during the pandemic, we've done about 11 fully remotely monitored trials. So we're looking forward to talking about this, getting everybody's perspective.
Thank you. Brandy, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Brandy Chittister. I am the president at iMark Research. Also, just, want to say thank you to everyone for joining for this discussion. A little about iMark. We're a medical device CRO. We've been around since 1999. providing full service support to medical device trials. I myself have been at IMARC for 14 years. Prior to IMARC, I was in preclinical research. My background is biomedical engineering. Within the company, I've been a CRA and also taken on other roles as far as auditing, training, some consulting, different things like that over my tenure. IMARC is roughly 50 to 60 person company, depending on when you ask. We have 2 locations, one in Cleveland, Ohio, and one in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And then, of course, with this year, we're pursuing more remote employees as well. That's a little bit about us.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And Xavier, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me today. I look forward to a great conversation about this very important topic. So my name is Xavier Lefebvre. I am the Global Vice President of Clinical Operations for Medtronic. What that means is that my team supports the 250 or so clinical studies that are being conducted by the different business units and regions around the world. My team is global. We have nearly 1,000 people located all throughout the world, and we do essentially all of the activities for Medtronic to support the clinical trials.
Excellent. And Eric, if you would introduce us to yourself.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. And thank you for inviting me to participate in the panel today. I feel very fortunate to sit on this panel with all of this high-powered clinical operations folks. I'm the regulatory guy, right? So I'm the one that takes the data that's produced and packages it up into a submission to get it to the patient, right, through the regulatory process. So this is a real important topic for us. I'm the global head of quality and regulatory affairs at Hologic. Hologic is, of course, the premier women's health company. We have, besides being one of the largest producers of COVID tests, we also have robust businesses in mammography, imaging, and surgical. And so this topic is very important to us. And I'm looking forward to the discussion today. It should be very interesting. So thanks, Tom.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for letting us know who you are. We're going to start the talk with a poll question, actually, for the audience. So I'm going to click on it now. You'll see, so the question is, what impact do you believe remote trial oversight has had on the quality of clinical trials? This is actually a question we're going to bring to the panelists as well. And your choices, as you can see up there, it had no impact. It has decreased the quality of clinical trials, or it has increased the quality of clinical trials. So it's certainly an interesting question. Ask folks to consider for a moment and to log in your answer. You'll see at the end of your PowerPoint presentation, which is available on your widget, that IMARC had done a survey with the same questions, an industry survey with the same questions. So no cheating, but the results of those surveys, the broader industry survey that they did, is available to you. So you can compare these results to those results and see how we fared. So I'm going to keep talking like I am, just rambling on like a car commercial for just a few more seconds, so everyone has a chance to register their vote. And now that we're sort of closing in, I mean, I guess let's go over the results first. So we've got about 41%. Okay, it's still going up. The popcorn is still popping in the microwave. So hold on, we'll let folks give a little more time. So, but Brandy, I'll give you the heads up. We'll start with. Sorry, we had a question about the poll on the dashboard. Brandy, we'll open up the first question to you, which is, has the quality of clinical trial oversight been impacted due to the pandemic? And we'll get to that as soon as we. Oh, lots of people voting. This is great. I'm going to close it in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. I think we're good. So looks like we've got 25% has said it had no impact to quality. 36% will say has said it's decreased the quality of clinical trials, and 39% has said it's increased the quality of clinical trials. So that's a pretty clear picture, Brandy, I'd say. What is your? How would you have answered that question? And what is your? I would love to get your assessment of the poll result as well.
Yeah, well, I can start with my take on the quality, and I would say from our perspective, we feel the no impact or the increased impact to quality because a lot more can be done in real time. So especially coming from the CRO space and helping with on-site monitoring visits and making the shift. One of the things that's been we've been really happy with is the technology is being embraced. So the ETMFs are being used more widely. The regulatory binders that the sites have are being updated in real time. We can look at them remotely. We can have access to medical records on a different pace or schedule than we had before. So from our perspective with helping with oversight, we definitely, feel that this has been a really nice shift and we're happy to see it happening. And just to take a quick moment, this is consistent with what we saw with our survey earlier in the year. There were roughly 35% who felt maybe it was decreased, but otherwise no impact or an increased impact to quality.
That's pretty remarkable. Eric, we'll talk for a moment about Hologic. I think your company has been certainly busy with the FDA getting approvals for diagnostic tests and moving other products forward as well. What is your assessment of the clinical trials the data you've seen coming to help you with the regulatory part of that process over the past year? Has it been altered in any way, positively or negatively?
Yeah, so thanks, Tom. I think the real issue, right, over the pandemic period has been the access for patients to participate in trials, right? So enrollment is down and things like that. So while remote oversight is an interesting perspective, the issue is getting data, period, right? And so the access to people not coming in to participate in the trials is a real issue, just like it is with normal imaging or normal surgical procedures that are considered elective. I think the issue is getting the data, period, in the period of the pandemic. So that's been a real challenge for us, and I'm sure for others as well.
Xavier, let's bring Medtronic's perspective in, and then we'll go to Hamish after that. But what is your assessment of how would you have answered this poll question? And more personally to you, how would you describe the past year? Has it been outside of the lockdown and the COVID-19? Has it been relatively smooth sailing? Has it been very challenging? Has it been easier than you thought? How would you characterize what's gone on the past 12 to 14 months?
Yeah, thank
you.
On a
clinical trial perspective.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom. I was looking at the poll and I was hesitating between the no impact and the improve the quality of the studies. I see it because the remote has forced us to be more focused on the activities. It has brought more real-time, I think as Brandy mentioned, more real-time activities. It has helped us work more proactively with the sites to really prepare for the monitoring visits. And so we have been able to pivot from on-site to virtual monitoring visit, and we have carefully assessed the outcome of visits, comparing what has happened over the last year to what we had before, and we have seen no difference in terms of the overall quality or the overall outcome of the visit with respect to data quality or data check and so on. And we have a pretty large sample size. We've monitored now this last year over 13,000 patients. We've done, how many monitoring visits? We've done nearly 2,500 monitoring visits remotely. So we now have a good sample size, and we are comfortable and confident that the data that we have is really good. We've used it for many database snapshots. We have used it for many submissions. We've been audited, and it has always been good. So, frankly, I look at COVID as having enabled us to really have a tremendous transformation in clinical trial execution. And what I tell myself is, did we really have to have COVID to enable this transformation? We should do this kind of transformation without a pandemic. So that's my take.
No, that's great, and we'll get more into that. It certainly has transformed a lot of industries, including the events industry, as we can all testify being on this virtual meeting. But Hamish, how would you have answered the poll question? And I guess I'll just make a statement. I would think with just the inability of people to get elective surgeries, or at least the reluctance to go anywhere during this, I just find it remarkable from this conversation, the conversation we had in our prep call last week, that there wasn't a larger impact on trials. I would have thought that this would have been an enormously difficult time to get anything done. But I keep hearing that from you all folks that that's not the case. So how would you have answered the question, and why wasn't the year as bad as I thought it would have been?
Sure. Well, that's a little bit of a loaded question, being a clinical research site. Of course, we never have data queries, no protocol deviations, and so therefore we haven't seen an impact. But in all seriousness, I would say that it has been. I would say that there's been no impact, perhaps an increase in the quality of the clinical trial, for some of the same reasons that Xavier, Eric, and Brandy brought up. And that is, we're able to monitor things in real time. And while it is a little bit more resource intensive on the site side to prepare the source documents and get them into an electronic format presented to the CRAs and the monitors, we aren't going 6 weeks, 12 weeks without a monitoring visit, where we make the same protocol deviation on every patient that is enrolled during that period of time between monitoring visits. And so I think things are, and often they're just honest mistakes. Perhaps a small typo in a source document even can create a sort of domino effect where each patient has the same small deviation, or maybe we're not capturing the information in a way that the sponsor would like us to. So I think that being able to review our work in real time has a lot of benefits, for sure. Mm-hmm. As far as your question about keeping things going through the pandemic, we did see a significant shift. We saw most of our asthma, COPD, any autoimmune disease type trial, the new enrollment went on hold. Then we were receiving protocol amendments so that we could do remote visits, new consent forms that allow remote visits, those types of things. And so we saw a significant drop in our accrual of new subjects into research studies. But of course, that all turned around in about July and August, when there were enough COVID studies to go around for pretty much every site that wanted to do them and had the ability to do them. I know we were probably receiving 3 to 4 study offers a week for COVID treatment studies, antivirals and monoclonal antibodies. So while we went from a period of high anxiety, we shifted quickly. And in fact, Brandy and I worked together on a fully remote migraine device trial right there at the beginning of the pandemic. And that was actually a godsend for us, because it gave our employees something to do they could actually, we ended up shifting and rotating and having teams come into the office. We had small little pods of employees, and that worked out really well. But all of the patients were seen remotely. So that was a very good segue and transition for us into fully remote trials for COVID trials.
Oh, great! We'll explore that a little more as well. I'm going to advance the poll questions, because the poll question is related to our next topic. So I'm going to read the poll question and then go to the Q&A box for a second, because we have a couple of interesting comments there. People are submitting questions, so thank you. Keep them coming. What impact do you believe remote trial and oversight has had on the cost of clinical trials? Once again, no impact, decreased, or increased. So I hope folks can find the poll and participate. In the Q&A box, Jort is inviting us all to Australia and New Zealand, where he says recruitment for trials has not been affected by the current pandemic. So that sounds like a nice offer. I think we could talk about international offerings in a bit. Someone had asked if, Hamish, if you could estimate the increase in time of the monitoring, prep, and visit conduct. I'm not sure if that's something we should address later, or...
I can answer that very quickly. I mean, there's always the preparation for an on-site monitoring visit, and that still happens. The difference is that even when you have electronic systems, there are still some things that are paper, such as right now for us, it's ICFs, EKG reports, pulmonary function test reports, those types of things, where we do have to scan them and upload them into a secure portal. And so I would estimate that the amount of resources that are going into each monitoring visit are about 1.5 times that of on-site monitoring visits. Monitoring visit is on-site, and the CRA or monitor is physically located in our office. We can sort of pop in and pop out, and answer their questions in real time and look at what they're looking at. And you lose a little of that with monitoring visits. So I think that the follow-up talks and calls take a little bit longer. But generally, I would say that it's more the preparing for the monitoring visit by taking whatever paper source exists and uploading everything into a portal.
Great. Well, I'm going to keep the poll question up there for a few more minutes to make sure that people have time to vote. Xavier, do you have any thoughts? Hamish made some really good points there. Anything to add?
Yeah. Thank you, Tom. This is because we have somewhat the other side of the medal from Hamish. We are looking at it from a sponsor perspective, and what we have seen is that overall, completely agree. The preparation takes longer. It takes nearly twice as long to prepare for a remote monitoring visit than for an on-site monitoring visit. But then we've seen that the actual visit itself is shorter, is more efficient, more effective. So the additional time in prep time essentially is offset by the time that is now gained during the monitoring visit. And the follow-up is also a little faster. So overall, we have it's offset. For a sponsor perspective, where we obviously have a big benefit is we don't have travel time. We don't have people going to the sites. We don't have the time that it takes to do that. We don't have the cost to do that. So overall, we are seeing a significant benefit for us to doing remote monitoring.
That's interesting. Brandy, I mean, from your perspective, the lower costs are always great, and it can be hard to kind of go back to the old way once you see how much money you're saving. First, let's speak to what Hamish was talking about. Do you have some more to add there? And then we can take a look at the results of the survey question and get in the cost.
Yeah, my comments really go hand in hand. We've seen also that the preparation takes longer. And from our perspective, not all of the sponsors that we've worked with have embraced it as quickly as others. So there's some time to educate and get the sponsor comfortable that this is a good approach. And sometimes it's also with the sites to help them understand, exactly how are we going to access their records, who will have access, how will we maintain privacy. Sometimes we have to negotiate agreements, to access the health records. And we have to, those can be complex depending on the site. But we have found, and we've also found where some sites have asked for some amendments to their contracts to ask for more money for the upfront work, like Hamish mentioned. And it still seems to be an overall cost savings, though, to Xavier's point, because we're not traveling or passing through the travel expenses. So spending a little extra time on the visit prep and also paying the sites a little bit more for that time still ends up, it seems from our perspective, to be a nice savings overall.
Great. All right, let's take a look at the poll questions. So, all right. So, 60% say it's decreased the cost of clinical trials. So I think that's something people are feeling across the board. Eric, we haven't, any thoughts? I know you're more on the regulatory side, but from a Hologic's perspective, has there been any discussion about costs of clinical trials and whether this is something that may motivate a more permanent adoption of this form of data collection?
Yeah, so let me give you the perspective from let's say a more rookie approach, right? I mean, we're in really the infancy of looking at how to use remote clinical monitoring in our processes. So we're in the evaluation stage, and really the keys for us in regards to the discussion on costs, the expectation is that it would decrease cost. I mean, that is the expectation, but the real question for us that we're trying to answer is flexibility, right? I mean, I see the number of questions that are popping up in the inbox regarding access to EMR and things like this. I mean, of course, this is the critical aspect for us in regards to implementation. I mean, I would fully expect the cost to be reduced, right? But the pieces that are maybe more salient for the novice is what does it take to get the access, and how much flexibility with the different sites is going to be required, right? And so those are the kind of things that are most interesting to me. But again, from my perspective, yeah, I fully expect it to be a reduced cost, right?
Yeah, for sure. We're going to shift into the questions we have from the audience, because I think we're getting some good specific questions. Aaron had asked what technology exists to give monitors restricted access to EMRs, as you alluded to, Eric, and what are the hurdles to get these implemented at sites? Jasmine asked what are some of the technologies that you've had to deploy to deliver on a decentralized model? And Brian again also asked about remote EMR access, saying we're going to have to rely more on shadow charts, which sounds interesting. I wonder, Xavier, I'll go to you first on this. Has Medtronic, what technologies are you relying on, and have you had any done any work with some of the points brought up in the questions, like shadow charts?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. So first of all, I don't think there is one solution. There are what we need to be with a remote monitoring approach is being flexible. It starts, by the way, these were some of the points that I think Brandy mentioned. Before we can do remote monitoring, we have had to modify many of our contracts with the sites to compensate them for the additional time that it takes to prepare. We have had to address access to the EMR system when they give us access to them. And now I've seen a question that says, how do you control it? Well, the most EMR system actually enable you to grant access to a limited part of a patient file. So we are being granted access to a specific part of the patient chart, not the rest, not all of the other patients. So we are obviously maintaining appropriate confidentiality. But that's obviously is the optimal solution, and we don't always have access to the EMR system. So when we don't, we are more creative, and that sometimes includes using Zoom and sharing the EMR system on Zoom so that we can see that. It's whether we see everything or not. Typically, a monitor will tell, hey, can I look at that tab? Can I look at this tab? Can I look? So it's pretty free flowing. So we are comfortable that we are having full access and that we are not missing part of the data. And that's why I mentioned, by the way, we compared the total number of adverse events submitted, the number of monitoring action items, the number of queries that we issue with a remote monitoring visit compared to a traditional monitoring visit, and we haven't seen anything. So that's a little bit what we do to make it happen. Did I answer the question, Tom?
I believe you did. Yep. And I'm sure there's more to be said. We'll hear from Brandy. I mean, and I do want to commend the audience. I think folks are stepping in as sort of a fifth panelist. So thank you. We've got a lot of additional great points on there. Someone asking about the EMR is used for SDV, and I don't know what that means, but I'm sure you all do. But will the hospital keep the EMR intact long enough for inspection 3 to 5 years later? So, Brandy, can you sort of follow up on Xavier's points?
Yep. I definitely agree with the things that Xavier said, and, mentioning flexibility, and, there's not a one size fits all approach to doing this. It's at the site comfort level and the sponsor comfort level. So we've done a very similar approach where we've used secure file sharing, where we can grant access to a site to upload their records in a secure location that's only accessible by their CRA. And then we keep a timeline on that. So we only have access. We make sure that they're aware ahead of time when we'll be looking at those records and how long we'll keep them. As far as SDV, that's source data verification. So that's what we're aiming for. And we would treat their upload of files. If we don't have direct access to their medical record and they upload the files, we would treat it as we would if we went on site, because that would happen sometimes on site as well. And ask that we can have a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting where they can screen share and walk through the medical record with us to make sure that we haven't missed any encounters or adverse events that haven't been reported. And as far as the savings of those, and that's a typical approach we would take to monitoring on site also, is if the true source is the medical record, then that's where we want to look for source data verification. And that's where we would expect that the source would be 3 to 5 years later. Some sites will make a copy for their own study files, but truly for us, when we're looking, we go straight to the source, which would be that medical record. And we would expect that to be the case for a BIMO inspection or something down the line as well.
Excellent. And Hamish, any thoughts on this and on this topic, and then we'll move on to some more questions and poll questions.
Sure. As from the site perspective, our costs have gone up revolving around the remote monitoring visits. But at the same time, the costs have gone up because it's more resource intensive for us. And so there's taking more employee time. That, and then we've invested in technologies to help facilitate remote monitoring visits, such as eSource. We implemented a commercially available electronic source document system, which is essentially an iPad that you can walk around and collect vital signs and everything right directly into the system. So there's nothing to scan and upload to a portal. That system, then we can provide temporary access to our sponsors and monitors so that they can see just the studies that we assign them to. And they can go in and they'll have their own unique username and password. And they can go in and actually see the studies see the actual visits and the raw data that we've collected on the patients for the purposes of the study. Those systems cost, there's a monthly licensing fee. There's a per visit fee of, I believe, $10 per visit. It's been costing us in the neighborhood of $3,000 to $4,000 per study in the rental of this software. But the flip side of that is we've been successful at having the sponsors reimburse us for that cost. So, and then just as some of the other panelists mentioned, we have also been able to increase our study budgets to account for things like remote monitoring visits and the increased resource utilization. I think that ultimately we're still in the infancy of this. And so I heard somebody describe it a little bit like a Frankenstein. There's so many portals that you need to go into as a site or as a study coordinator, everything from the where the safety reports are stored, to the EDC portal, to the ePro or the eDiary portal. There are training portals and these types of things. And so there's a little bit of a learning curve for all of those, but it really creates inefficiencies in the workflow process when there are so many portals. And there doesn't seem to be one technology vendor that is truly vertically integrated all the way through. So we have one global login and we can actually walk through all aspects of the trial. But I do think that that remote monitoring is here to stay, and I do think that it is in our best interest as a research site to be able to provide options to our sponsors so that they can also benefit from the efficiencies of some of these technologies. It's here to stay, and if we want to play ball, then we better get in the game and make sure that we figure these things out and make sure it's efficient and works for everyone.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to advance the next poll question in a moment and ask. Actually, I'll do it right now, but I'll ask the question to Eric. There's a question from Aaron on the Q&A box about the EU. He says, "I'm accepting that the EU does not allow remote monitoring due to GDPR. Is everyone else accepting this?" So do you have that whole logic, any work with the EU, and are they consistent with the FDA, and are they handling things in a similar fashion?
My understanding, Tom, is that because of the intense privacy laws, it is very different in the EU, right? And so I'm not aware of any current remote monitoring type programs underway, but I could, again, I could be totally in left field. I also saw on the chat line that questions about BIMOs, related to remote monitoring. To my knowledge, and talking to the agency, they don't have any significant numbers of BIMOs that have been conducted that have looked at this type of project or site, remote monitoring of sites in a project. So, maybe Xavier has some better experience in that space, but I think it's fairly limited so far, even though the agency, back in several years ago, said that this was the future of clinical trials. So maybe it's all catching up.
It's not the future yet. Hold on, Eric. Xavier, well, I'll get to you in one moment, but I just wanted to read the poll question for folks. What impact do you believe remote trial oversight has had on the safety of study subjects? No impact on ensuring the safety of trial subjects, less effective at ensuring the safety of trial subjects, or it's more effective at ensuring the safety of trial subjects. So please start registering your vote. And while you're doing that, Xavier, do you have any thoughts on the EU?
Yeah. First of all, it is absolutely correct that at the beginning of the pandemic, we were essentially dead in the water. It was essentially impossible to do anything. We have seen a tremendous shift, but it has not happened, I would say, at the EU level. It has happened at the country level. So what we now have to do is design some specific monitoring tactics for specific countries based on what they allow us to do. So some of them we can use, an electronic file sharing. Some of it we cannot get the data to leave the site, so everything is done on Zoom. We also sometimes have to distinguish between the information that has patient data on it versus more generic study information around regulatory clearances and those kind of things. So we essentially cater our activities for the specificities of the individual countries. But now we are doing, about 40% of our monitoring visits in Europe are done remote, which is a tremendous value, especially in COVID, in the days of COVID. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. That's great. All right, I'm going to look at the results in a moment, then we'll go to a question. It's actually one of our bullet points, and I want to get to it. But if anyone else wants to vote, you got 5 seconds before I click the slide, and we'll see the results of the survey. So, all right. So once again, what impact do you believe remote trial oversight has had on the safety of study subjects? Over half say no impact, and about a quarter says more effective at ensuring safety. So these are all sort of positive trends. There's a question in the Q&A box, but it also pertains to one of our bullet points about talking about designing a hybrid approach to running a clinical trial. Brandy, what is meant by a hybrid approach, and how do you design that, and how do you monitor that? And we can take that across the panel if other folks want to have a swing at it.
Yep, from the perspective of this talk, when we're thinking of the hybrid approach, we're thinking hybrid between on-site oversight and remote oversight, which, as we've mentioned, we were sort of forced into this remote oversight as far as looking at monitoring visits, maybe even initiating sites, training them, working on things through a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, a call. But what do we think about the future design as far as like, maybe there's parts of this that are really nice, but maybe there are other parts that we want to keep with an on-site approach as far as being there to train or to form relationships and types of oversight that we might have. So when we're thinking of hybrid, it's just that mix of the on-site and the remote. And I think it's really interesting, some of the things that Hamish brought up with the technologies and how at this point there are so many different places we can go as far as, where do we put the source? Where do we put the data? Where do we put the products? Where do we look at our regulatory files? We're logging into all these different systems and it's a little chaotic. And some of it's a Band-Aid approach that's not meant to be permanent, and some of it is working really well and we'd like it to be permanent. So I think there's just definitely a lot of options for how we can run the trials in the future using this combination of on-site and remote.
Great. Eric, any thoughts from the Hologic perspective?
So let me throw a little curveball into this. I mean, I know that this is probably sacrilege to my colleagues who are the clinical specialists and experts. But when I think
Eric.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to go off here. So from my perspective, when we talk about hybrid, I mean, yes, of course, the discussion around remote and not remote is an interesting one. But when I think about it from a regulatory perspective, what I'm interested in is how do I get the data, right? How do I get the data in a package that I can submit? And so, one of the things that I would say that should be considered is not just a hybrid in the sense of how we're going to monitor the trials, but how are we going to get the data? So, things like, in my mind, hybrid means things like the coupling of prospective trials and real-world evidence, right? Things like this that really are a total pivot away from the traditional, right? Something that is more, it's different. It really may truncate the traditional approaches, but it is something that when you start talking about hybrid, at least from a regulatory perspective, I think about data hybrids, right, rather than just monitoring hybrid. So just throw that out there as a curveball to the panel. Don't cut me off, Tom. I'm just throwing it out.
Anybody want to swing at that curveball, or are we going to let it sail over the plate? We got a lot of questions in the Q&A box.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I have a thought on that. Like just thinking about, where we get the data from. And there's also, we talked about the oversight, but then there's the actual execution of the trial and thinking about how we're getting that data. But I think when we're talking about especially class 3 implantable devices that require imaging for follow-up, the decentralized kind of coming to the patient is definitely takes a little bit more thought than maybe a pharmaceutical where we can mail that to them and then we can collect some questionnaires, and not to, skinny down another type of trial. But, there's some challenges to think about with collecting data depending on the type of data we need to get. So it's a good topic to talk about.
Indeed. Again, from my perspective, when we're talking about novel approaches, to the clinical space, I mean, it's two pieces, right? It's how we monitor and execute the studies, but also, in the end, how we get the data. And so perhaps another topic for another day, but again, I think, when we talk about, for me, again, remember, I'm the regulatory guy, so I'm, how am I going to get this submitted? I'm interested in not just the conduct of the trial, right? I'm also interested in how I can get the data the fastest for a submission to get the best outcomes for the patients, right? So, for me, it's a combination of both. But again, maybe that's another topic for another day, Tom.
We've got a lot of days coming up, a lot of Tuesdays we can have these conversations on. So let's definitely pursue it. So the final question, poll question is up. What new technology have you added in the past year to support remote trial oversight activities? Check all that apply. And we've had some questions in the Q&A box about specific software and such being used by people asking what you're using, what tools you're using for remote visiting. So just looking to, let's see, so one from Anand, are the new software and remote access options used by CROs due to COVID being validated by regulatory agencies in the US or worldwide? So Hamish, is there any sort of review of the tools you're using for clinical trials?
There is, and in fact, sponsors ask for it. So when we are using our e-source document system, electronic source documents, where we're capturing the data directly into the database, we have paperwork, or I guess testing of the system that's done by the software vendor that validates it as being Part 11 compliant. So that, the way that they validate it is they validate that there are audit trails, they validate that it is secure, they validate that that it meets the FDA requirements. So I don't think that it's something that the FDA does. The FDA doesn't come in and validate. If they come and audit, then they will. They want to see these validation paperwork itself. And to be honest with you, when I look at it, it's a whole bunch of IT jargon that I don't quite understand. It isn't written in plain English. but it is something that both the software company and the site sign, validating the system. I did notice that somebody in the comments asked us what e-source doc system we use, and we use real-time CTMS.
Oh yeah, please.
Yeah, and we did evaluate clinicalresearch.io, which is also known as Creo, and I know that's another very popular one. But those are the two that I am most familiar with.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
we will, and thank you for. I was actually the one I was looking for, so thanks for calling that one up. So I'm going to take a look. I'm going to show the final poll question results, and then looks like we've got 13 minutes left. Then we'll hit a couple more questions from the Q&A box. So yeah, everyone's doing virtual meetings, of course. I don't know if there's anything interesting here to you folks. You can address that in your question. But secure file sharing, yeah, all makes perfect sense. Xavier, do you have a thought on a question from Jennifer from a sponsor perspective? Have you found a good way to conduct sponsor oversight visits with CROs, CRAs during remote monitoring visit? Oh, and maybe this isn't applicable to you, Xavier. Do you use CROs, Xavier?
We actually have been contrarian to some of the trends observed in other parts of the industry, in that we are acting as an internal CRO for Medtronic, and we have our own flexible capability to run the studies. Medtronic has such a volume of regular studies that we've built our own internal capability. And so, no, we don't use CROs. So sorry, this one I cannot do it. But, I could say, though, that virtual meetings, collaboration tools, you can be 2 or you can be 3 on the connection. So I would venture that I don't think that it should be a problem to add another participant. And we do that ourselves when we do our own quality control by bringing our management team to the visit. We add additional people and they just join on the conversation. So that should be, the technology should be fine.
Well, Brandy, how are you interacting with sponsor organizations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that's exactly how it's worked for us, that we can manage the visit because it's a virtual visit, and we can have a Teams meeting in which they can observe what we're doing. We can screen share with them as long as we're upfront with the site, that we'll have another person in another location and we kind of talk about the approach combined, but we can definitely include them in on any parts of the conversations, discussions with the PI or with any of the site staff or whatever needs to happen. We've been able to invite them along.
Eric, you're working with CROs as well? Oh, you're working with CROs unlike Medtronic?
Yeah. We primarily use CROs, right? And from our perspective, when we engage the CROs, we specify the interaction we want to have and how we'd like to see the engagement via remote monitoring or in-person monitoring, right? So we specify in detail how we're going to do it. But I'm amazed by listening to Xavier, the magnitude of the number of trials that probably that he's managing. It's probably an immense task to keep all of this straight.
Absolutely. All right. So it seems like there's a lot of questions about, I'm just trying to get at some of these great questions here. So someone asked about executing clinical trials and development of risk registers. Has there been any sponsor of site inspections using the risk-based approach? And if so, what have the FDA's inspections findings been? I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that one.
I can say a few words.
Sure, please.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Actually, the risk-based approach is, and I've also seen some comments regarding centralized and so on. The way we are thinking about the studies is now how to manage all the different components to try to, in the end, improve the quality of the evidence. And so the risk-based approach is something that we have deployed. And we actually have seen that it enables us to focus our activities and our efforts where we need to deploy the resources. So we actually have observed a direct increase in quality and performance for those studies that use risk-based monitoring. We have also seen a better outcome with regulatory audits. So that one is a no-brainer. We are pushing risk-based monitoring for every one of the studies. And we are now adding centralized back office monitoring to really help identify those areas where we then need to send our monitors or we need to ask our monitors to start focusing on. So it's becoming a big integrated universe. And if we can manage it well, when we manage it well, we can be really very effective at improving the quality of the studies.
Excellent. Hamish, someone asked about investigator capacity. Has there been any reluctance from investigators, and this can be open to the group as well? Anyone pushing back is in terms of trying to facilitate remote monitoring?
That has not been a real issue here.
Okay.
We've remote monitoring it's not entirely new. We would have monitoring calls even pre-pandemic that were augmented by on-site visits. And so from the physician perspective, I wouldn't say that they are spending a great deal of extra time. It's more the study coordinators that need to or have the preparation time. But I don't think it's necessarily uncomfortable in any way. I don't think that they're feeling as though safety or quality is being compromised. So I would say that has not really been an issue. Now, there are some other aspects for hybrid trials, such as using home health nursing agencies, where they're not our direct employees, and yet we're responsible for the quality of their work, and those do cause some anxieties sometimes. But that's a whole nother topic.
And Brandy, someone has asked if you would recommend conducting a site evaluation visits to be completed remotely.
Yeah, I think that's will probably remain an it depends kind of question, and it would depend on the type of study that you're looking at and the requirements that the site might need. But just kind of speaking to some of the technology we've seen, I mean, there's even a company that makes like a 3D printing of a pair of glasses that they can send to the site, and the coordinator can wear them, and you can see what they can see, and they can take you on a tour. So there's definitely a lot of new technology coming out that can try to help bridge some of these things. But I think, you know, there's a lot of factors to deciding when you can do things remotely or when you should do them on site, and those are on a case-by-case basis. Not to be evasive, but
good answer, honestly.
Yeah.
So we're kind of coming up against our time. We have about 5 minutes. There's a few more questions here up in the Q&A, but I guess the one I sort of wanted to ask you has to do more with the future. We've alluded to it and mentioned several times, and we'll see where things go. What fascinated me from our comment or our conversation last week was that this is something the FDA has sort of been pushing for a long time, correct? Remote collection, remote clinical trial management. I would think that if they're pushing for it, that it's going to be easier to kind of keep going forward as the way we've gone over the past year. What does the future look like? Hamish, maybe you can kick it off. Are we going to snap back to where we were, or do we see us moving in that direction, going in this direction further?
I think, I'm going to kick this one to somebody else. I don't think I have a lot of to say on that.
Okay.
Yeah, see what they say, and maybe I can add to it.
Sounds good. Xavier, you want to pick this one up? And then Eric?
Sure. Thanks, Tom. So I don't think we're going to be back to where we were. At the same time, I don't think that we're going to stay at the level where right now, today in the US, we do 95% of our monitoring visit remotely. I don't think we're gonna keep it that. If only because, and that's really funny, we are starting to get message from our own monitoring team that tells us, hey, so when can I start going and visiting my sites again? Because people are getting a little antsy, and if you're a monitor, I would say that you have a certain perspective. So it's going to be a little less, but I think that a lot will remain remote because it brings a lot of efficiencies. So I would say, if you had to ask me, the range of activities will be in Europe, maybe around 50%. In the US, maybe around 60 to 70%, potentially 70. That would be what I would be guessing for Medtronic.
Okay, Eric, we'll have you go next. I just want to tell the audience members, and then Brandy, you can close us out. If you have questions for specific panelists, please do submit them now. We'll have them in writing and we'll get them to them. So we should try to get an answer for you. So if you have questions for Brandy, for iMark, or for anyone, just please do submit them. So Eric, what do you see happening over the next, where do we go from here?
There's little doubt in my mind that remote monitoring is going to solidify. I mean, if you think back, why the FDA really wanted sponsors to move to this was threefold, right? It was one, that there was a belief that it was going to be easier to follow the investigational plan. Okay, so secondly, I think the agency believed that it was going to be a better way for us to maintain case records, right? If you think about that. And then finally, I think the third one was, to ensure that the records are adequate and that there was appropriate accountability. Now, so if indeed those things are being done, and it is clear, I think, at least from my perspective, that these tools are doing that, then it's only going to increase. And I think Xavier's numbers are probably about right. I mean, I would say that 65 to 70%